People had been asking me to revisit the Kia Stinger since it came out. In large part, that's because the fans of this car felt I gave it an unfair review to start. My opinion was I felt like it was going to be forgotten about after a certain amount of time when the gloss wore off because it lacked drivetrain refinement and certain attention to detail. So I'm going to revisit some of that now that this car has been updated. They've dropped the 2.5-liter turbocharged engine that was out of the end products in here, left it rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive in the United States, and made some interior and exterior detail changes. So I'm going to cover the exterior first. It is almost identical, and those people that loved its uniqueness for the price point. It's a great change from like the Accords and Camrys in the world, and when you look at this for around $38,000, it's very true. They borrowed and grabbed the best parts of some of the European competition, like the Audi Sportbacks, some of the BMWs, and it's got that Maserati-ness to the rear end as well. If you're not a fan of that and some of the copying pasting that Hyundai and Kia do, you may not like it because it's not all that original. But again, it is original for a Kia and Hyundai product, and it's well executed on the outside. Let's just leave it at that. The interior has been slightly updated, and when I say updated, it's essentially nothing. They've added more gloss black plastic. Wow. They've updated the infotainment, which brings it closer in line with their other products. They got rid of the children's toy 4x3 bezel and added a widescreen that is still a tombstone design, but it's well integrated. The interior space is trying to be that GT sports car thing that Kia had beaten into us, that this is an enthusiast car designed by enthusiasts, although I haven't been able to verify that with anybody that that's actually true other than marketing. There are certain elements of this, at least in the GT trim or the GT line trim, that make a lot of sense. For one, this uses the 2015 era switchgear for the steering wheel, the HVAC controls, and the center gauge cluster. So compared to modern products where people are switching over to, companies are switching over to haptics, touch everything, this is a breath of fresh air. While it may not be the latest and greatest, everything works well, including analog style gauges. The other thing is, because this is a lot of borrowed technology from the G70 Genesis of the previous generation, the interior space is really well screwed together in this model. I have not had any creaks or rattles like I did on my original review. I mean, there is chintziness. Like, you grab the rear view mirror, the plastics creak. I mean, you can tell there was cost cutting here, and you know, it's up to you. Does this really bother you or not? The interior space mostly feels usable. The driver's seat in this car has pretty decent adjustment. The lumbar support is one of the most aggressive I found in most modern cars. It feels like a boulder going into your back, and it offers really good adjustability in that way. So on longer trips, this thing is going to be comfortable. The back seats are very spacious for its design, other than maybe the sloping rear roof might bother the taller people. And the hatch in the rear is really one of the main reasons why you would buy this. There's so much cargo capacity that you lose in traditional sedans, and that's the big talking point of this car, and that's one of the reasons why it's great. I think other than that, this is the same stuff that we saw before. It's up to you whether you like this style and interior design, but let's head into the shop. I'm going to briefly talk about what's going on there. Underneath the Kia Stinger, this car has the 2.5-liter turbocharged engine, which makes 300 horsepower and 300 plus pounds-feet of torque. And this engine is borrowed from the N-Line, but it is now mated to an 8-speed automatic that has been developed in-house by Hyundai. It is shared across multiple products like the Genesis brand. They typically mount their 8-speed automatic to that, and the tuning has changed quite a bit over the past 5 years, and they have made multiple revisions. This 8-speed shares the same 3rd, 5th, and 8th gear with the 6-cylinder variant, but otherwise it is completely unchanged. You can get this in all-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive, and this four-popper is rear-wheel drive with an open differential. There is no option here for a limited slip, which I'll talk about in the drive. Now, the main thing you're going to note, nothing really has changed here. They might have changed some tuning in terms of suspension, bushings, but all that, they don't talk about it. And this is one of the things with Hyundai and Kia as a brand. Almost every single piece of development is done in Korea or outside the US. So we don't get a good technical breakdown of what's been done or changed. But what I do know is this platform, this architecture, is the last generation. So the new G70, the new G80 has been updated. So this is still shared with the last generation G70. And the concept was to take The G80, the Genesis G80, which had a multi-link front end, multi-link rear, higher end luxury platform, strip and change the front end of the car to bring it down to strut. They reduced a lot of the more expensive aluminum components to have a price point that's lower. And what they were trying to do is create a GT style car, like a GT luxury sport touring car, whatever the hell that means, and have a price point that undercuts that of BMW, Audi, Mercedes, and some of the luxury brands. So underneath, this is much like the last generation G70. However, it lacks some of the refinement because it doesn't have as much NVH material. They don't have as much fillers, sealers, under panels, less sound reduction or less noise reduction on the cabin. So it's kind of like taking some of their luxury stuff and then peeling back those layers and then offering you more of an affordable price point like this. So the main reason you're going to choose the 4-popper, I'll be honest, is fuel economy. On the highway, you're going to get probably around 30 miles per gallon with this with rear-wheel drive, whereas obviously the turbocharged 6-cylinder, you're not going to get anywhere near that. But really, this is the same car we looked at before, strut front, multi-link rear. There's a ton of steel under here. They do use some aluminum in the suspension components in the front, but let's get this out on the road. I'm going to talk you through why or why not you would buy this. Stinger, 4-cylinder turbo, launch control, sport mode, traction stability off. It feels much lighter than the V6 equivalent, big shock. Feels like there's a lot less weight, feels like the balance is better, it feels more nimble. It's just fast enough. Obviously, this is pulling a lot more weight than something like an Elantra N or a Veloster N, just to be expected. It does not sound good at all. I mean, honestly, it just sounds like a 4-cylinder, so you lose the character of the driving experience. The manual or the automatic transmission, this torque converted automatic, has been recalibrated multiple times, and now it is pretty responsive. The closest thing I can compare it to is the TLX Type S, the way that they do their new gearbox. It's about 25% faster and more responsive. So if I go over in a manual mode and you pull a paddle, it will attempt mostly to rev match downshifts. It's not the smoothest thing. There's no comparison between this and the ZF tuning and the BMWs, and the Audi transmission is definitely has the edge in terms of smoothness and manual control. With the exception here, if you turn off stability and traction control, you can bang off the rev limiter. So at least it holds gears in that regard, so that's a big positive. Now, the big negative, and I'm just gonna get right into this. One of the big things you buy this over like a TLX Type S or front wheel drive cars is because you can buy this as a rear wheel drive car. And you would expect that this thing would do rear wheel drive things. And it absolutely does not. This is just an absolute piece of garbage. I'm gonna say it that way. You have an open differential, which makes no sense in a car like this, why you would even do that, spend the money to do an LSD. And let's say you don't put an LSD in here like they did, they decided not to do that for whatever reason. Why, even with everything off, traction, stability, sport mode, manual control, do you have some type of torque vectoring by brake effect where you feel this thing turning and then you feel the brakes dragging in the back, where this thing will not rotate at all unless you absolutely do something stupid in the wet. Like turning this car feels like a front wheel drive car. And to me, 100%, this eliminates this from any type of discussion as a performance GT car. It's garbage. I'm sorry, and Hyundai and Kia just still continue. In a car like this, it's absolutely inexcusable how invasive the traction and stability control is when you have it on. It just makes this feel like a front wheel drive Camry. So, I mean, the only other thing I will say, and I'm gonna talk about this in the final thoughts too, is the one good thing that they do with this car, and again, it has to do with its roots, its underpinnings and architecture, is it drives straight down the road on the highway. Excellent. It's really well controlled. Body control is great. You can carry a high speed and it feels really refined. It feels more like a luxury car. Even like moderate turning. If you're at like 50-60% turning, the balance is good. It feels nimble on its feet. And it's a very good highway car. There are a lot of good highway cars, and you don't need a Kia Stinger to do that. But really, if you have to have this body, if you have to have this car and you love it, you're going to love driving it down the highway every day as a daily grinder. And the 4-cylinder does genuinely return good fuel economy here compared to the V6. So if you like the body, you like the interior, you like the way it drives, and you're not driving it like an enthusiast, or you're not driving it like, you're not expecting it to be like a sports car like the Germans are, it does all of the basic stuff really well. The ride quality, mostly the transmission tuning, the drivability, all of that is really good. It's just, yet again, my constant complaint about this manufacturer is they don't know how to set up a car over 7/10. If you want that last 3/10 of driving experience, this just not cut it. But I'm just gonna get into the final thoughts. A lot of this is just carryover from the last video. Final thoughts on the Kia Stinger GT line with the new 4-cylinder turbo. This is rear-wheel drive, so of course this review is going to be skewed more towards that way. And I went back and recorded this a couple times. I originally released this for Patreons, and I really watched it like 3 or 4 times, and I thought, yeah, this isn't really fair to the existing fan base and owners of this car to just kind of like completely write it off for some of my own personal reasons. So I'm gonna get into both. My personal reasons are, I feel like Kia mismarketed this and misbranded it and tried to make it into something that it wasn't. This is not a true, pure GT sports car. Yes, it is a rear-wheel drive architecture, but my big thing is a lot of this feels faux. It feels fake. It feels fabricated, from the vent work on the hood to the way that the car drives in rear-wheel drive form. And believe me, I was really excited to drive this in rear-wheel drive form because I'm like, okay, here's a real competitor to like something that BMW does or Mercedes has had, and it's just not that. And I think that's where a lot of my disappointment lies. You know, Kia and Hyundai, as I talked about in the drive, they always set these cars up so the average person can't crash it in a drive-through. And there's so much going on with electronic stability control that takes away a lot of the fun. And then even when you turn it off, it's just not a dynamic handling car. So if you're somebody that really likes to drive, you're going to be turned off by this. The transmission programming isn't as good as it should be. And there's just a lot of little details here that I don't like. However, the big thing is, and this is why I've come back to record this, as I've driven it more on a daily commute, the 4-cylinder is incredibly powerful, and when you're driving it day to day, it is a refined experience. It drives down the road great. It handles 90% of your commuting, everything that you're going to do every day, in great comfort. It's got just really good layout in the interior in terms of space. The hatch is completely usable, and I love the fact that it's a quiet interior and a refined feeling interior. The suspension damping's good, the tuning is good there. And because some of this is a carryover from the G70, when you look at the audio system, in which we didn't test it officially, but you look at the speaker layout in the door, you have this vertical axis with the low driver, mid-range, and upper range driver, or the tweeter, and it just has a great audio system. Even though maybe the electronics and the speakers aren't as high quality, it sounds really good for the price point. And that, combined with the way that it drives down the highway, is something that I really appreciate, along with the decent fuel economy out of the 4-popper while still maintaining good speed, road presence. So I guess there's 2 camps. If you are a driver's driver and you want a true rear-wheel drive experience and that dynamics of the car wanting to rotate on you, or you want to be able to pitch it sideways on a whim, that's not what this car is about. You might as well just get the all-wheel drive system. Of course, you get a penalty in fuel economy, and of course, there's more weight. But, you know, again, cruising down the highway, daily commute, great. Driving in a performance manner, not so great. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.